Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 115 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Ingrid. In today's episode, I'm talking to Juliet Landau-Pope of JLP Coach about organizing teens. Now, Juliet, we spoke a long time ago. It was episode 20 and now we're episode 115. Can you believe it?
No, it's amazing. And it's been absolutely fantastic to watch the Declutter Hub grow and flourish. And it's amazing the work that you're doing. Fantastic.
Thank you so much. And I'm like, wow, because at the time we said, we'll have you back. 100 episodes later, but you are back. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's always fun to chat to you.
Just so you know, listeners, Juliet is an award-winning productivity coach and study skills consultant, helping students and young adults to develop time management, organizing, and exam revision skills. An Oxford graduate with a background in academic teaching, Juliet trained as a certified coach and set up her consultancy JLP Coach in 2008. She's an expert on overcoming procrastination, and she has written 2 books, Being More Productive in 2017 and Clearing Your Clutter in 2018. Juliet has also recently launched her own academy for virtual organizing, and she appears regularly in the media. Now, Juliet and I have known each other for ages now. I mean, it just keeps getting longer and longer. I mean, I copied it like from the last podcast, which was like, it was 6 years, but it's 8 years now, Juliet. We've been friends.
I know. I feel like I've known you forever, Ingrid.
Juliet and I met when we were both in the board of the Association of Professional Declutterers and Organisers here in the UK. And Juliet was head of training and I was president. And indeed, we're just great friends. And we together trained about 250 professional organizers starting out new in the business. I mean, we've done it all, haven't we, Juliet?
Yeah, and I think the great thing about our friendship is that we're so different. We've got different backgrounds and different interests, and yet we have this passion for not only for organizing, but also for training and for motivating other people. And it's that shared passion that we both really love.
I know. That's why I'm so delighted you're back on the show. So we are going to talk about organizing teens or teenagers. Because when we think about organizing skills, we always think about, because a lot of us work with adults in their homes. And you've really carved such a nice niche for yourself. They're working with teenagers. And I think it's just so fantastic that you're teaching them those skills already from a young age. You know, of course, we always think about kids as young children, like primary school, where we teach them where to put their Lego and where to put their crayons. But there's that whole kind of in-between phase that is so in need of all those skills.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful age group to work with. My kids are now coming into their 20s. So I've been through it myself. I know your kids are still just entering that period, aren't they? But it's a really wonderful age to work with. And of course, there's a big difference between working with a 13-year-old and working with an 18-year-old. I should say, it's to be cautious about generalizing about teens, because it's almost like a whole generation, lots and lots of differences in personalities and circumstances too. But it's a period of such change. They're going through making decisions about their careers, about friendships, about relationships, about their bodies, about their sexuality, about who they are and who they want to be. And it's quite a tumultuous time. So there's lots going on in their lives. There's also lots going on in families. A lot of, it's very often a time when youngsters are either pulling away or experiencing tensions and difficulties at home. Partly because they're growing up and becoming adults and being themselves. And that's a very natural thing. But it's also because parents sometimes just don't know how to handle those changes. And so that can be quite difficult. And then, of course, there's that whole question of expression of who you are, and that impacts your clothes. It impacts what you want to keep, what you want to put up in your bedroom, who you want to be in the world. And so I think there's a lot of confusion and a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of secrecy as well. Who do you talk to about what, and who do you trust? And I guess the most exciting thing for me about working with this age group is I really feel like I'm instilling some little nuggets that might be useful later in life. So I'm not, pretending that I'm going to teach them everything they need to know. And of course, they're going to go on and do all sorts of things and make all sorts of mistakes. But what we know from working with adults, that many people just don't learn how to set up systems, how to manage routines, how to develop habits, how to overcome procrastination, how to motivate themselves. And I just think you're never too young, you're never too old, and you're never too young to learn some of this stuff. So if you can learn it before you leave home, before you go to college, before you have to deal with too much responsibility in your life, it's such a benefit.
So true. So then my question is to you, are there any specific organizing challenges that teenagers face? Is that different than adults?
I guess one of the differences between working with teens and adults is when we work with adults, we're usually employed by the person who we work with. So a mum or an older person who's downsizing, or whether the clients contact us and they employ us, they might be recommended. With a teenager, obviously, it's usually a parent who hires me and then introduces me to the student. And of course, my first question is always, are they on board? I always have to make sure that they're up for it, because there's no point. You can't impose an organizer on a teenager. It's not like working with a 4-year-old where you just if they don't want you in the room, there's no way. So it's really important to build trust. It's really important to establish what my role is, and establish the boundaries, and establish who I report to and what I share. I think it's really important that I explain to the client, to the student, that this is all about them. It's all about helping them and empowering them and motivating them and making their life easier. My role is not to give them more work. I'm not there to help them, to get them to tidy up and do more homework. I'm there to help them make better use of their time and their space. And as a study skills expert, I say, I'm here to help you study smart, not just study hard. So I'm not going to give you more work. I'm not like a tutor who's going to pile on more work. I want to make your life easier, and I want to make it work for you. So once they buy into the benefits, and then for them to identify what are the challenges. So again, I don't make any assumptions. I don't walk into someone's bedroom or sit down. Now I'm working mostly by Zoom, so I can still see their space if they choose to show it to me. But I always ask them, what are the challenges? What are you finding difficult? Are you missing deadlines at school? Do you spend time looking for things that you've lost? Does your mum yell at you or your dad yell at you because your room's a mess? What would make your life better? And so it's helping them buy into that. And then sometimes I can share strategies and I can actually explain how to do things. And more often it's talking them through and letting them come up with the ideas as well about what would be better. So for example, if they've got lots of papers piling up on their desk, or at school they're often given handouts and forms and things, and they get scrunched up and left behind in their school bag. So what would be a good idea? Maybe having a routine of once a week, maybe on a Friday afternoon, just before the weekend starts, to look through those papers and either file them or shred them or recycle them or whatever. But think about, it only takes 5-10 minutes on a Sunday evening, planning ahead, having a way of actually planning your time as well. Because again, one of the differences between adult clients and teenage clients is they don't wear watches for the most part. They might have a watch as a decorative gift that they've been given, but they don't use a watch. They will check their phones all the time, and they don't have calendars. They might use an app, or they might use a school homework website or something. Quite often when I say to teenagers, how do you know what you're doing in 3 weeks' time? Like, what happens if someone were to invite you to an event in 3 weeks? How would you know whether you're available or not? And quite often they say, I'll ask my mum, because their mum knows when their dentist appointment is, or when the end of term is, or like, you've got a maths test in 3 weeks' time. How do you know what you're doing for those 3 weekends? Have you got football practice? Have you got a family event coming up? Have you got something going on that's going to, how, and they don't have a way of tracking time. So actually showing them whether it's an online planner or how to use a diary or how to use an app, those can be really basic tools. And the same with managing time on a very micro level. Just, you've got 3 pieces of homework in 2 hours. How are you going to break up your time and make sure you get everything done without being in a panic?
You know what? This makes me laugh so much because this is exactly what happened like 2 days ago in my house. When was it? Yes, 2 days ago in my house. So no, it was last week. Sorry, it was last week. So I'm out getting a couple of bits from the grocery store. I get a text from the scout leader saying, "Is Max coming to the scout meeting tonight?" Of course, I missed the text because I was actually putting my shopping on the band for the cashier to do it. So I'm in the car on my way home thinking, let me check my phone before I drive off. I don't drive and text, just to be clear. And I see I missed her text. And she's like, "Is Max coming?" So it was like already 50 minutes after 7 o'clock. And I'm like, well, apparently nobody in my house can live their appointments if I'm not there, because apparently I am the only one. So we had a whole conversation with Max saying, I think it's time. You need to start having a Google Calendar or something where you put these things in, because I can't be constantly telling you what to do. So, and I think now we're at the point we might need to get, because our listeners know I am a paper calendar person, unfortunately, but I think actually now we need to start going to some sort of family digital diary where all of these things are put in, because I just don't want to be the one who reminds everybody all the time.
No,
But we're so used to it from when they're little, when we are in control of everything. And I'm like, no, it's your responsibility to show up. But in the end, they still text me.
You're absolutely right, because I think it's not just about being in control. It's about letting him take responsibility and letting him learn as well that if I've got these weekly engagements, I'm going to make sure I get my homework done in advance, rather than just be told at 5 to 7, oh, remember you've got scouts. He needs to work around it. And especially if he has to do something to prepare, or maybe, read something or bring something to the meeting or do something, have that ability to track. I'm also like you, I use tech, but I also love finding, and lots of again, there's this expectation that teenagers do everything online, but I think there is also a bit of a backlash and understanding that it's not great to be looking at a screen all day long, and it's not great to be entirely dependent on your phone or on your laptop or tablet or whatever. And there's a lot of satisfaction from holding a pen and paper or using a visual display or making a poster, and really low tech. You don't need to spend lots of money. There's lots of free resources. There's a great website called Print a Calendar with hyphens, print-a-calendar, where you can just download and then customize a calendar which you can use to plan either a study schedule or a weekly schedule. So I work with teenagers on finding out what really works for them and sharing some of these tools, sharing strategies, but also really encouraging them to develop habits. It's all about routines. It's not just the big magic makeover and clearing out your room for a one-off weekend. It's also, how are you going to make it simple and doable so that your clothes get from your body to the laundry basket? Or seems like a miracle sometimes. Or depending on the rules in your house, are you allowed to take coffee cups up to your bedroom? Or then how do they get back down to the kitchen? These are things I'm still struggling with, and my kids are no longer teenagers, but we're still having these conversations. What belongs in your room? And also, it's not just about your bedrooms. How do you, as a household or a family, manage the shared space? So that can be also, especially with older teenagers, but even if younger ones, if they're starting to cook, how do they take responsibility for cleaning, tidying, organizing, putting things back, knowing where things belong? Because much as we as parents often want to do things for them, we're not doing them a favor if they're not learning how to do it themselves. Because one day they're going to be sharing their home. Either they're going to be living on their own, or they're going to be sharing with somebody else, and they're going to need to manage those routines, or they're going to be living back with us. They're going to be boomeranging back, and we don't want to be doing their laundry and clearing and everything forever. So it's all about habit formation and routines and what works for you. Do you want a recycling basket in your bedroom so that the papers don't all pile up, or are you able to take it downstairs and put them outside? Who manages all that, and who makes those decisions?
So you mentioned something about study skills as well. Do you feel that if you teach them more organizing skills, it also helps them study better?
Oh, absolutely. I think organizing skills and study skills is a huge overlap. I don't really know where the division lies, because I think if you can plan and prioritize, if you can make decisions, I mentioned procrastination, knowing how to kickstart yourself when you feel stuck, being able to focus on what matters. That's what decluttering and organizing is really all about. We've discussed this lots of times. It's about looking at whether it's a lot of stuff, it's like whether it's looking at a pile of handbags or a pile of books, and saying, what do I really care about? What really brings joy? What has purpose and meaning in my life, and what could I let go? And that's true about time as well. So how do I fill my time? What do I get to the end of the evening and realize I've been on the Xbox all evening and I still haven't done my homework? Just being able to monitor yourself and being able to make active decisions so that you're making choices, I think that's very empowering. And when it comes to studying, it's partly the practicalities of planning, focusing. I teach teenagers memory skills, writing skills, revision skills, which are more academic. But I think the bigger picture is about making decisions and focusing on what matters, and also learning yourself, becoming more self-aware and knowing what works for you, so that you can, if you know that you're, more of a morning person or an evening person, or you can focus on some things better at different times of day, or that you get inspired by certain things, or that certain people bring you down, you don't want to be around certain conversations. Just, being aware. A lot of it is about well-being and mental health. I think is very important issue to have in mind when talking to young people. I mean, we know that as organizers that clutter and organizing there are huge health benefits, especially to mental health. But I think with young adults, especially when there are so many pressures from school, from home, about careers, about money, about all sorts of things, helping them feel more in control of their lives and being able to make more confident decisions, whether it's deciding which A-levels to do or whether it's deciding which piece of homework to do first. I think those are organizing skills, because you're kind of prioritizing. So I do think it's all connected.
Yeah. So interesting. So then my next question is, because of course, so teenagers work with you, and do you then, do they feel like, yes, I'm going to tidy up my room and do it all? Because for us as parents, why is it so difficult to motivate our kids, our own teenagers, to tidy up and get organized? Have you got better success? Because I'm going to send both of mine to you.
First of all, I would say that if either of my two children were listening to this, they would be in stitches. They would be on the floor, because they know I have very little impact on them at all. And I think as a parent, it's the hardest thing in the world to motivate. We can support, we can guide, we can cajole, we can bribe, but actually having an impact, I think, is phenomenally difficult. So when I'm speaking to parents, I run workshops for parents, and I often coach parents as well. I'll say, just be aware that even the professionals can't, even as a professional, I can't talk to my own kids about this stuff. It's really, really difficult for all sorts of reasons. I think partly because there's so much emotion, we're so invested, we want the best for them. We not only want the best for them because we love them so much, but we also have an interest. It's our home as well, and it's our life that's being impacted. It's our money that's being wasted, or it's our time that's being impacted. So it's really hard to take ourselves out of the picture and say, this is actually in your interest, and it would benefit you if your room was tidy. So I think there's all that emotion, there's all that history, there's all that pressure that we bring. And we project as well because we can't separate ourselves. So I speak to lots of parents who had a really hard time at school, got very nervous about exams, got very stressed about deadlines, even if they've been super successful, hasn't always, been an easy route. And then they can't help but project that pressure. And one of the first things I always say to parents is just chill, step back. Really hard. Sometimes kids need to learn they need to make mistakes. They need to learn by making mistakes, whether it's not doing well in a test or whether it's not finding a piece of homework. Maybe they need to go to school without their trainers and see what it's like to not take part in a PE lesson because they haven't got their trainers, rather than have us try and do everything for them all the time. So I think it's that kind of helicopter parenting, and criticism and judgment and emotion a lot of times comes from love. I know where it comes from, but it's really hard to express it constructively sometimes. I think it's also tendency, and again, I speak for myself, like exaggerate, catastrophize, generalize. So say things like, you always do this, or why do you always do that, or why do you never do this, rather than focusing on the very specific task. So rather than saying, I noticed that your wet towels are on the floor, would you please put them back in the bathroom? Which is a simple request. It's so hard to say that rather than, you always leave your towels on the floor, and why have I told you this 100 times before and you never listen? And it's so easy to escalate those conversations rather than just focus. So I would say, I guess the main thing to parents is pick your battles, just decide what really matters. If they're doing okay in school, if they are, reasonably happy, if they are able to have a conversation with another adult, and if they are able to, I don't know, if they're doing okay, maybe the towels on the floor isn't the thing to focus on. Maybe we've got very limited time. And I think maybe I would say this to you, Ingrid, because I know your kids are slightly younger. The older they get, the less they want to be with us, which is really natural. I didn't want to spend time with my parents when I was an older teenager. I love my parents dearly, but they have their own lives, they have their own interests, they're far more interesting things. The older they get, they spend less and less time with us. And so the time that we do have is really valuable, really precious. Do you want to spend time arguing with them, nagging them about the shoes in the hall or the books on the stairs or the homework that they haven't done? I think it's really hard to get that balance between wanting to guide and nurture and help them on their way, but also picking battles and making sure that we focus on the things that really matter. So sometimes it's about overlooking and just saying, you know what, I'm just going to have to turn a blind eye to that. It's their room if they want to leave it in that state, as long as they get to school on time and they do their homework and they're reasonably okay.
So close the door to the bedroom and not tidy up behind their back, because they never learn.
No. I think have very clear house rules. I mean, I've always said, no food in the bedrooms. They can't take. I don't want, and I scared them by talking about mice and spiders and creepy crawlies and things that might happen. But and if laundry is not in the laundry basket, it doesn't get done. I'm not going to go into the rooms and pick up their clothes. I will do the laundry in the laundry basket, but they can't come to me and say, where's my jeans or where's my blue t-shirt, if it wasn't in the laundry basket. So I think, every household will have to negotiate those things, but having really clear rules can really help.
Yeah. I fully agree with that. So what are your top tips for teens then?
Top tips for teens would be, know what's important to you. Recognize that being organized, or not, it's not about being organized, it's about learning organizing skills, because nobody is 100% organized, except you, Ingrid. Maybe.
No.
Maybe you're probably the most organized person I've ever met, but most of us do not. So it's not about being organized, it's about having some organizing skills and about having some routines and knowing that it can really help you. It's about noticing what works and what doesn't work. So noticing that if you pack your school bag on a Sunday night and check the night before what lessons are coming up, whether you need your sports bag, your music bag, whatever it is that knowing when you're going to Scouts and when you're not, knowing when half term is, knowing when your maths test is coming up. that's going to take a lot of stress away from you. It's actually going to alleviate stress, knowing that planning is not an extra task to do. It's actually something that can make life simpler and more manageable, and it gives you more time. I mean, I often say to some of the students I've worked with have said, what somebody said to me the other day, now that I've learned to do my plan when to do my homework, I have more time to spend on the Xbox and to chat to my friends, because I don't spend the whole evening faffing around. I used to come home from school, faff around for ages and start doing my homework at 9 o'clock at night, and then go to bed late, feel tired the next day, and then feel really cross that I hadn't had much time off. Whereas now that I figured out how to do one piece before dinner, one piece after dinner, I know how to manage that. I can spend an hour on the Xbox, or I can chat to my friends, and that's fine. So I think it's just helping them understand that this is all about this is about you and your life. This is not about pleasing anybody else. You're not doing this to make anybody else's life better but yours.
Listeners, wow. Okay, I'm on board with you, Juliet. So, okay, we've had really good top tips for teens. So, any advice for us parents then to close this podcast? What do we need to do?
I guess my number one tip, I talked about setting boundaries and focusing on picking your battles, but I think my number one tip would be to notice the good stuff. We're very good, and we do this generally. You know, I think all of us are primed to notice what's not going well in our lives, and not notice the mess at home. And you walk in through the hall and someone's left their bag where it shouldn't be or whatever, and you immediately notice it. You don't necessarily notice that they've hung their coat up, or that they've, I don't know, taken their coffee cups back into the kitchen. So I think notice the good stuff and praise and praise and praise. Something I picked up years ago when my kids were in primary school from a parenting course that I did was to build on the strengths and give kids, whether they primary kids or young adults, build up the confidence and really focus on the things that are going well, and instill in them the motivation to want to do more by pointing out all the good stuff. So it doesn't have to be a great big drama. Yay, you hung your coat up. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't think you'd do it, but you did. But just, I appreciate you hang your coat up. Or not even I appreciate, because that's putting you in the picture and it's not about doing it for you, but just, isn't it great how coats are hung up? Just noticing, not taking for granted the things that they're doing. Because I think as parents, we tend to overlook the good stuff.
Yes. A client of mine the other day said, I haven't done it. And I went, you haven't done it yet.
Yeah,
So
that's a good one.
I think as professional organizers, we learn as well. I learned that from a training course that I went to, and I thought, oh, that's so good. I want to use that. And boom, 3 days later,
Yes.
I was able to use that tiny little example, and it made her like, yeah, I haven't done it yet. And it made her feel good.
Yes.
How fabulous is that, to not focus on the negative, but focus on the positive things that are happening.
Yeah, something that I learned early on as well with my own kids, it doesn't always work, but is to say when they come in from school, or when you haven't seen them from a while, tell me something good that happened today, or what did you do well today? Because they might not, they might have to think about it, but they want to share with you. They might have failed their French test, but done really moderately in geography, but not necessarily feel like want to tell you about that. Or they might have had a nice chat with a friend on the bus on the way back, or just enjoyed their lunch, or just tell me something nice that happened today. Tell me something you enjoyed, or something that you did well. And I think just help to focus on the positive.
Yeah. Well, listeners, on that bombshell, I think we've got everything covered. I love that. Think about the positive and look at the positive. And I love that. So, Juliet, where can I find our listeners if they want to find more about you? Where can they find you?
Well, go to my website, which is www.jlpcoach.com. And I'm JLP Coach on social media too, on Twitter, just getting started on Instagram, and anywhere else, I'm JLP Coach.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for your incredibly fantastic podcast and all your information. And I hope it has inspired people. And even if you don't have teens, but you have younger children, or maybe your children are young adults or maybe beginning 20s, I'm sure there is lots of stuff in here in this podcast that can help you in your life as a family. And maybe just maybe you've picked up some other golden nuggets here, what Juliet was sharing with us. So thanks, Juliet, for being our guest on our show once again.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been
You're
great.
welcome. You're welcome. So that's it for this episode. We hope you've all enjoyed listening and are inspired to take action. And we appreciate you taking the time to listen today. If you want to have more handy tips and advice from Leslie and I, you can find us in lots of places. We have a fab supportive Facebook group called the Declutter Hub Community. And we are on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook page too, where you can find us as at Declutter Hub. If you'd like to know more about our VIP membership, have a look at members.declutterhub.com. If you don't want to miss our next episode, please subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast and it will pop into your notifications each Friday. Thanks so much for listening and see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration and don't forget to tune in next week.